we believe that we need to at least have a degree, we need to have a master's at least, and at least we have some kind of a certification there.
And a lot of people had this mindset that if we don't get a job out of this bootcamp, at least we have someone to blame.
Because we as a human being try to blame others for what we are not able to achieve probably.
But a lot of time the instructor is not disclosed to the students before their first class.
Of course, you can do self-study, you can do a lot of things, but you may not get the structured learning, and that's why you also joined a bootcamp.
But in this very part, I also believe that the bootcamp providers and institution play a really important role, and they are failing at it because they are marketing UI and UX, product design.
For marketing, it's more about getting people into the bootcamp and what language they understand.
What do you think has been the most groundbreaking innovation?
So if you look at the UX part of Apple, right, from their systems to their OS,
It's pretty clean.
it's
right?
pretty clean.
Jaguar also rebranded themselves.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
At the same time, tell me which company, automobile maker, recently made so much buzz around the world that everybody knows about Jaguar.
Do you think there is anything such as ethical use of AI in design and unethical use of AI in design? Hello everyone, my name is Devgoel, and as some of you already know me, I've been a product designer for about more than half a decade now. I've worked in several industries, but I am not here to bore you with that. Today is my first podcast, and yes, I'm awkward about it. But here we go. My first guest is Mr. Vishu Aggarwal, who has not just been a really good friend of mine, but also a long-term mentor of me. Mr. Vishu, he has experience of 15 plus years in the same industry as us, and not just he is not just a product designer who designs a 10-page website or a 100-screen application, but he thinks of UX as a universal concept. Everything is UX wherever you go, whether you are sitting on a chair, whether you are driving a car, everything. And let's hear it from him. So, hello, Mr. Vishu.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm good.
It's been a while. When was the last time we had a word?
I think 2 months back.
Just 2 months.
Yeah.
It feels like a year. Last I saw you was on the boot camp, and I wasn't able to make it to the last
Yes.
module as well.
Correct.
Your goodbye module.
Yeah.
But here we are. I'm happy I didn't come then because it wasn't a goodbye from my side. I was just getting started. So let's have a little introduction. Could you
Sure.
please share your experience? How exactly did you start in this space, or did you directly just come into product design, or was there some alternative start?
No, not really. So when I started my career around 2007, so there was no concept of UX and UI. I think the concept was there, but maybe we are not aware about that in India. So I started my career as a video editor, a graphic designer, VFX artist, right? When I was in my college, I would say. So I'm a dropout of CS, by the way, right? So I was doing CS and I was doing animation, 3D animation, VFX together.
You are a dropout
Yes, of CS.
from bachelor's or master's?
From the company secretary course, professional. So it's like a CA course of company secretary.
Okay.
I did my BCom, but that is also from correspondence because I never wanted to do a formal studies. I was more interested into I know that I need to do some kind of a graphic.
That
or
is
some
very
kind of a
relatable.
3D animation, right? So that's how I started my career basically. And even before I did my course of 3D animation VFX, I was already a video editor. So I started video editing in class 10th on Final Cut Pro.
Okay.
So the story is like long back, my father brought a iMac, and for us the computer was more about gaming. And that particular time,
Even today for our generation it is.
Yeah, today for our generation, I would say. But back in that time, Mac did not have really games to it. So that was a piece of just a PC sitting in my desk. So I thought what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started exploring. I started video editing on it on Final Cut Pro. And by the time I finished my college or I would say the course of 3D animation, I was an Apple certified trainer by Apple,
That's pretty impressive.
right? And I did a certification. I also went to in Germany. I got trained by Apple in Germany in 2012 by a master trainer, and then you get a proper title of Apple certified trainer from there. And then I didn't look back. I keep doing certifications. I was the only one who is a certified instructor on Adobe, all the products of Creative Cloud with Apple. And then I did Microsoft, Unity, Unreal. I have various certifications under my
Since you have mentioned this part about certification, a lot of people who are new into UX or just have completed their bachelor's, or let's just say are in their last year,
Correct.
have this notion that yes, if we just can get a pile of certificates from anywhere,
Hmm.
we can easily get a job, or it would increase our odds of getting a
Correct.
job. What do you think about that? Because a lot of time I've seen people showing certificates which are not accredited by any industry, or they just got a certificate for the sake of getting certificate.
Hmm.
A lot of people, like even in my company, I have interviewed several people,
Correct.
and a lot of them are showing me certificates of NGOs and all. Now God bless you for that kind of work. It's really good you're doing that. I appreciate it. We ourselves do a lot of philanthropy work
Hmm.
whenever our pockets allow, our profits allow, but that kind of certificate won't help you get a job necessarily,
That's correct.
right? So could you guide the viewers
Sure.
regarding
So
that?
certifications are not important, I would say, in terms of getting a job. So when I did my certifications, it depends on what line I am into, right? So I somehow got inclined towards the, I would say, education field.
Mm-hmm.
So in the education field, certifications are a little bit important, right? For example, if a company wants to hire me to train their employees at a larger scale, so they look for a certification that this person is a little bit professional on that. But yes, if you're looking for a job in the graphic design, video editing, or if you're looking in UX and UI, you need to have a good portfolio. That's very, very important. Certification does not matter. There are a lot of people out there in the in the job market, if you look at it. So they don't have any certification, they don't even have a degree basically, right? They don't even have masters in probably in design. So they can still do the job because this is a field which is artistic. You need to have that sense, you need to have that art with you,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what people look for. Doesn't matter how many certifications I have or someone has basically, but if their portfolio is not good or it's not up to the mark, then you may not get the job.
So it would be safe to say that in a design specific industry, portfolio holds way more tangibility
Way more.
than any certificate.
Any certificate. Any certificate.
Where do you think this entire thing came from, that people running, students running after certificates and all?
I think it's more about a mindset. For example, when we
Like
when
how
we
was it formed, even as
so
a
I think
mindset?
so I think the it's been formed because in India we believe at more formal education, right? So we believe that we need to at least have a degree, we need to have a master's at least, and at least we have some kind of a certification there. So it becomes a more validation point for anybody that I have done a certification, that I have a knowledge about it. People just think, okay, we get a piece of certification and we get a job. So see, what is the mindset of a youngsters are? They go to a college, they know they get a degree, and that degree will get them a job.
Right.
I think that degree will never get you a job probably. It's your skill set which get you a job. Degree is just a piece of paper. Of course, that validates you have done, you spend your time somewhere. It becomes a validation for you, but your work speaks, and your work is important. I know a lot of people. One of my friend who is into a little bit different field, I would say, but related to gaming and all. He has not even done bachelor's,
Hmm.
but he's sitting at a very good package now. He's around 60 lakh LPA package today, right?
That's
And
beyond
earning
impressive.
great.
Yeah.
So it is not about the degree, I would say. It's about the skill set. And like if you look at most of the companies nowadays, Google, Apple, they doesn't look for the formal, what kind of formal education you have. It's the right skill set you have. Are you the right person to fit in that culture? That's more important.
Since you mentioned the point of validation, I somewhere believe that it's less about validation, more about shifting the accountability. Like even for the upcoming generation and for my generation, and by saying that I'm not here to target someone, it's
Mhm.
just a stat-based thing based on different research conducted by different institutes. So one thing I've always observed is that people are failing to take accountability, and they don't even want to take accountability. They are like a lot of, like I met you in a boot camp, and a lot of people had this mindset that if we don't get a job out of this boot camp, at least we have someone to blame.
That's correct. So they probably believe, they can blame the institution for it that did not provided the placement. They might blame the trainer. They might blame, the course curriculum was not great. So I think that is there for sure, because we as a human being try to blame others for what we are not able to achieve probably. So that is definitely there. But At the same time, uh, I think the validation point which I mentioned about of having a course or done some kind of formal education, basically, I think it's not that you should not do it. You should do it. What I'm trying to say is that at the same time you need to be different from other people, right? So if in a boot camp, if almost we have, let's say, 100 students who are doing a boot camp, right? So how are you different from them, and how your portfolio is different from them, right?
Right.
So you have to put in the extra efforts to go and create something different, right? So that's what matters.
So you're saying boot camps are not all bad, and one can
Yeah.
and should attend them, but that is more from the point of view to upgrade their skills, not to go after a job, because
Yes.
job is like a side effect,
Yeah.
right, of providing value and having that tangibility in your portfolio.
Correct.
But since you mentioned that, yes, it's a pretty good idea to attend a boot camp, how would you define the line that, yes, behind this line there are bad boot camps or the ones one should avoid, and after this line are the ones which are safe to join or which can actually add some value to person's portfolio and skill set?
Yeah. So I think the main thing I think there's no bad boot camp, because everybody, any company, if you
No,
talk about.
by bad
Yeah.
I don't mean to demonize someone
Hmm.
or something. By bad I just mean that the ones who are not, let's just say, up to that level yet.
Correct. Yeah. So I think the
How do you identify them?
so it's the only way to identify is that first of all know what you like, right, and
As
what
in?
you can do. So what I would say is that you should, before you join a boot camp, do a little bit of your research. Maybe do like there are a lot of free courses nowadays which are structured courses. So I'm a little bit against YouTube courses, I would say, because they're not structured.
Hmm.
But if you can go to Coursera, there's a great course by Google, which I think almost everybody knows in the UX industry, I would say. If you look at Microsoft, they have a course on UX. Maybe study that. Look at your skill set, whether it aligns with your vision, whether it aligns with your skill set or not. And then look for a boot camp. Now, when you're looking for a boot camp, of course, you might look at your budget. That's the first thing to look at, because not you may not be able to afford all kind of boot camps, I would say, because there are lot many in India now. They have international boot camps also, you have Indian boot camps as well running on. So you might look at that. The second thing you might look at is the curriculum, right? Is the curriculum updated, right? Or then what is they are teaching you, basically, right? And who is going to be your instructor, right? Now most of the boot camps have instructors, I would say, from different backgrounds, right? So instructor is also important, because generally, is as per my experience of teaching boot camp, the curriculum I get is very different from different companies, but the way I teach is what brings value to the course.
But a lot of time the instructor is not disclosed to the students before their first class or something, and up until then it's already too late to even drop and get your refund.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the concerns generally you have in the online bootcamp, because
Right.
maybe in the upfront the phase might be different. When you join a bootcamp, it might be different. But I think the all the companies, if you go to a big brand bootcamp, they have a refund policy of 7 days or 2 weeks. So I think you can judge the trainer. Maybe you can do a background check of the profile of the trainer, and you can, if you like the teaching style. I think it's not about being someone bad or good, I would say, is that are you able to connect with the trainer? That's the main thing, right? Are you able to understand what he's trying to teach you, right? If you like the teaching style, I think you should go ahead for the bootcamp. And the best benefit of the bootcamp is it provides you a detailed structured learning. That's the main thing over here, because I've seen a lot of people, of course you can do self-study, you can do a lot of things, but you may not get the structured learning. And that's why you also joined a boot camp, because you wanted to have a structured learning, and want to know the flow of the UX, what is the exact flow
Right,
to
exactly.
start to end, basically, is right. Because if you go to YouTube and say, okay, I want to learn about UX, you might hear a lot of different things about it,
Eh,
and you may never be able to decide how to start, what is the first step and what is the last step could be there, right? So that's what the bootcamp teaches you. So they're not bad, I would say, but you need to put extra efforts. What
right.
I have seen in the bootcamp is, if I'm giving an assignment to someone, they are just doing for the sake of completion and getting a
I
certificate,
was just about to come to that
right?
only.
So it's not about that. It's about you have to add value to it. So tomorrow, even if your portfolio is selected, what if I ask you some questions about that portfolio you have created? A lot of people don't even have an answer about it, because they don't know what they have written in the case study of UX. They don't know what they have done. Maybe they have copied from somewhere. Nowadays people are using AI to generate user research questions and answers as well, right? And they may not be able to even answer about their own case study, what they have written, because they have never understood that.
This thing about the case study you mentioned, I believe a lot of people just skip the research part, the ground thing. And one thing I always say is that if you want to do something, if you want to start something, you don't have to start from ground level, you have to start from underground level,
Correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this same thing was said by another actor. Honestly, I'm quoting him only. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to take his name right now. But yes, people just forget about the foundation. They just think it's just a lot of documentation and paperwork. But in my personal experience, and please let me know if you have experienced the
Mm-hmm.
same, while interviewing candidates, I have at times, most of the times in fact, I have experienced this, that they are definitely able to show some aesthetically pleasing screens, but they are not able to justify why they designed, how they came up to this design or something. Because there is no research, there is no, it's like you have a notion, you have a mindset, you have a thought process, but you are not able to tell where it came from, because it's not your mindset, it's not your opinion. This opinion was formulated by someone else
Correct.
and you just borrowed it instead of forming
Yes.
your own opinion, because it
Mm.
will take way more time and effort and you think it's useless.
That's correct. So basically, so even when you start the bootcamp, or if I teach someone, right? So people say, why you're teaching so much of theory, right? UX is about theory actually, because you need to understand that science of doing something before you do it practically, right? And I have people from day one who want to design screens in Figma, Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, probably like that, right? But UX is not about just the piece of design of the screen. Like if you look at Don Norman's statement about UX, he says UX is everything from start to the end of a company experience, right? It is just not a piece of a screen which you see on your mobile phone, on your desktop basically. So it's everything as an experience you have. And like you mentioned the starting of the bootcamp, I also believe that the UX is almost in everything. It can be applied in any field you're doing, right? So we have to look at a bigger perspective, and people don't understand that perspective. So they need to understand the theory first and implement the theory in the UX. Because if you do a research, you might come with a design which is very unique and personalized to your brand and for your targeted audience, and that's what UX focuses on.
But in this very part, I also believe that the bootcamp providers and institution play a really important role, and they are failing at it because they are marketing UI and UX, product design. Firstly, they are confused between all three. They are marketing it as the same thing, whereas I personally believe that UI is a subset of UX.
Mm-hmm.
UI is a more specialized formation entity or designation of a UX industry only, right?
Correct.
And not just they are not able to differ it, but they are saying that okay, UI UX or product design is just designing websites or mobile screens. That's why the entire narrative is going that way. So these institutions play a really important role, and I don't want to take name of any bootcamp or the one I met you in, but they have marketed in such a way that even students are now falling victim to these kind of narrations and perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's correct to a certain extent, I would say, because for marketing, it's more about getting people into the bootcamp and what language they understand. Right. So if you're a beginner, people especially coming from a different field into the UX and UI, they just understand what is UX and UI is. Probably they even don't know what is UX and UI. They just have heard a hot word, and they're just focusing on that. And that's what this most of the bootcamps are targeting on.
But okay, agreed with you on
Mm-hmm.
that point 100%. Because of course I also went through the entire brochure of different boot camps
Yes.
and stuff. But then again, the thing is that these institutions, and not just these, even countless actual educational institutions which have been established
Mm-hmm.
for like 20-30 years in this country now, they still just market it. And the thing is that those institutions were the ones who were supposed to be responsible, those scholars were supposed to be responsible to set the right narration, to correct what's wrong. And because they fail at it, now it falls upon corporates like you and me and our corporations to show them the new way, show them that what actual path is. They are not even on a path right now, let alone right or wrong, and then guide them. Like boot camps are not just failing at their job, but and I'm not saying about every boot camp. A lot
Yeah.
of boot camps are really good, I love them. And I don't want to mention their name. There was this bootcamp which was a 5,000 USD. It was a international bootcamp.
Correct.
I personally attended it online. It was a 3 month bootcamp. It was really good. And trust me, hardly for 4 or 5 hours in the entire bootcamp, we touched Figma.
Correct.
Hardly.
Hmm.
And it was so amazing. We learned about n number of things, and even when it comes to product design, we were talking about WCAG guidelines section 408 and all those stuff, 408, 508, and these things are completely missing in today's bootcamp. So not only they are failing, they are setting wrong narrative, they are appreciating just for their profit motive, and then students come to these corporate houses to get a job, they bomb at it, and then again the job market is blamed.
That's correct. So I think when you talk about Figma, you said okay. When I did a international boot camp, I think we only did for 4 hours or
4 5 hour
5 hours
max.
Figma, right? But if you talk about the mindset, what students have over here, or I would say the participants who are coming to the boot camp, they think it's all about Figma, and from day one to day end, they just want to learn Figma itself,
Hmm.
right? So somewhere the companies, or I would say, I don't blame only the boot campers. I would say, of course, it's, I think I know mistake the how it's been marketed, I would say, right? Because if you look at most of the boot camps, how they kind of market themselves is that okay, we're going to teach you 20 tools, we teach you 30 tools basically here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those tools are not important, because if you go to any corporate or if you go to any hiring manager, they say that we need to have a right skill set. We can train them on Figma. We already have our design system in place. You don't have to do much in it, right? We already have a style guide made for you, right? You just need to have a right mindset to carry out the UX. So you may not have to even technically design everything yourself in Figma, or we are ready to help you. We can get it trained. We can hire a corporate and we can get it trained in 2 to 3 days to you in Figma, right? So the most important is the mindset, creating that mindset. And of course, the way these bootcamps are marketed is more about tools than telling the student that what knowledge gain you can have in terms of UX and what kind of products you can create.
But then it would also justify saying that a lot of these boot camps. But coming back to the UX part, so as you just shared that back in 2007, I believe there was no such term coined yet as UX. How did this entire thing came in? Like I know Don Norman coined the entire term while he was working on
Yes,
systems for Apple. And how did the evolution of this thing called UX now took place?
I think it took place late in 2015, I would say, right? So now because of the the market is speeding at a larger speed, I would say, right? If you look at it, I remember, for example, if you look at even if you look at Windows update, we used to get our Windows update in like 4 years, 5 years, right? Now you're getting a Windows update every year. You're getting the Mac OS update every year. Your phone gets updated every year, 6 months basically. Adobe's commitment to do a 6 months minor updates, and then
Patches and stuff.
major updates in every 1 year, right? So because the cycle is getting very fast, the competition been rising. So there have been a lot of demand of UX designers because of that. A lot of startups are coming up, right? And that's how this term started becoming more popular, because the product life cycle has to be speed up, right, overall. And you need to create more prototypes. You need to try out different features before you can publish to your product. And that's how it started becoming more popular.
You just mentioned the thing about prototype. So I remember earlier in the days, it was less about UX, more about UI,
Correct.
right? Even like I guess we both come from a background where we have seen that time where we were designing all the UI and all on Photoshop, not on
Correct.
Figma or
Yes.
something. So how did the shift from aesthetically pleasing interface shifted to accessibility?
I think it's not about, it's still about pleasing. I think if the website should look still good, I would say, because visual
But
design
not
is
at the
equally
cost of
important.
accessibility, right?
Not about the, yeah, I would say usability, I would say
Usability, right?
majorly, right? And accessibility and usability are both are important. So of course something should look good while it has to be usable as well, right? And that's the most important thing. So it is not a shift. I think the website, I think, was pretty bad looking previously also, I would say, right? When we used to design in Photoshop
Indian
or
government websites
any,
are still very
yeah.
bad
So if you look
looking,
at the
you know.
government websites, they still have pretty bad UI, I would say, right? And even the user experience, I would say. So I think it's a
Even user
collection of both them.
experience.
So it has to be pleasing to the eyes. I would say it should be give you a good experience about when you use it and even look at it, right? But at the same time, it has to be usable also. And what we my usability is that following the standard patterns. It's just not about that website is functional or not. It is about when you're designing it more meaningfully. So previously, let's say if I was designing way back in 2010 a website, I would just put a random color of blue, maybe an orange, yellow color, and put it there. Now, when we are talking about in the UX state, we might know, okay, why do I put that orange color there, right? Why should my button should be in orange color? Why should my button should be in blue color, right? Recently, if you look at these studies, Google have done around 25 shades of blue testing on their search, right?
Right, I saw
Which
that.
people are not even aware about. They're doing an A and B testing on you, right? And they try to find out the patterns of human behavior. So that color can have a big impact on it. And that's just the color I'm talking about. There are a lot of other factors we have in it. So the website has to be pleasing. Still, I would say the pleasing, of course, makes user feel good about it, make it feel trusted. But at the same time, it has to be usable. It should go with their mindset. It should go with their psychology of the user. For example, if you look at cred is a great example of that. Now, if you look at the cred itself, some people love it, some people don't love it,
I don't know
right?
if cred people would like that we are mentioning
Yeah.
them.
So I think cred knows about that, right? Every brand knows about it. For
They have a
example, if you look
fantastic
at
UX.
Apple, right? Not everybody loves Apple. We can have a very long debate between Android and iOS right now, right? And you might find a lot of flaws in Apple, and you might say, okay, Android is much better. But it's about the target audience. Not everybody you
Right.
can make happy. And UX also teaches you that you can't make everybody happy, but you're giving to the user what is needed toward your targeted audience, I would say. And that's what Apple has been doing, or what this is what Samsung does, or this is what Cred does, basically, I would say, right? uh,
Since you just mentioned about the blue shade test of Google, what do you think has been the most groundbreaking innovation in UX up until now? Because I believe UX is still in its infancy. It's a really new thing, right?
mhm.
It's just that people don't exactly understand what UX mean. They think a 10-page website means UX or a 100 scene app means UX. That's why they are bombing in the industry. Otherwise, it's a booming industry. It will
Correct.
create a lot of jobs. Yes, again, my question. What do you think has been the most groundbreaking innovation, you would say, as per you?
I think, as per me, Apple is a groundbreaking innovation, if I
Which
say it
part
out.
of Apple?
Everything. So if you look at the UX part of Apple, right, from their systems to their OS,
It's pretty clean,
it's
right?
pretty clean. It's been designed. I have personally opened a lot of Macs, and when you open a Mac, you get a different experience. If you look at the internal structure of it, the beautifully it is arranged compared to a normal Windows laptop. If you get it, right, you're going to feel a lot of difference basically, and even the opening experience is going to be different for you.
But then Windows also give you much more free
Flexibility.
hand,
Yeah, it gives you
flexibility.
flexibility, it gives you repellability. I would say you can upgrade your system. That is definitely there, right? So like I talk about the target audience, right? People maybe if you look at the way the Mac has marketed themselves, right? Of course it might not be
Apple has
reputable.
been really specific about what kind of
Yes,
people they want to
they
let
want
into
to.
the ecosystem.
Yes, and people understand that value over the time, I would say, right? I use both. I use Windows, I use Mac, both. To
Same.
be frank, I have used Android. I still use Android, and I use iOS basically. But the user experience is much different for both of them,
Right.
right? I'm not saying it's about bad or good, but personally, somebody might like Apple more compared to Windows, or somebody might like Windows more than compared to Apple, I would say, right? So I think if you look at UX have been a core of Apple, and that's why it is one of the most successful companies in the world. If you look at it, right? Even if you look at the innovation, if you look at the Figma itself. So when Figma brought up, right, now it is like Photoshop of UX and UI, right? There was nobody could have thought that it could beat Adobe, right?
Right.
And Adobe tried to purchase Figma, as we know, 2 years back. They tried to brought Figma as well.
Yeah.
So I think if you look at the
They
Figma, the
failed,
core
but
at Figma has been the user experience, right? They target the right audience. They knew that designers needs to be more collaborative. That's what their thought process was. They created a cloud software, They put it at the right time where everybody has internet to it, right? And I think if you look at, we almost have 24 hours internet nowadays. Maybe in way back in 2000, late 2000, we did not have that. Now we have a good speed. We can work on cloud softwares. Figma pitched in at the right time,
Exactly.
right? And that's what the innovation is basically. And there are a lot of innovations if you talk about, if you look at the UX itself. I think it's just not about the UX, it's about the overall innovation. UX just makes that process smoother, I would say, to bring that innovation to people.
But UX is the way to innovate, right?
Yeah, it's one of the ways, I would say. You have design thinking also, I would say. People
Of
might say, okay,
course.
we might not say it's a UX, but people might call it as a design thinking methodology or a framework to kind of do an innovation in it. So I won't say that UX is just about innovation. It is also about making things better,
Right.
making things easier to use basically, right? Innovation might be there already in place, right? But how you can make this better. For example, we already have cars from now 100 years, right? But cars are getting better and better. Why
Right.
it's getting better, right? Because we are now continuously improving on top of it. We are doing UX. If you look at Zomato was not what it is today, but they are evolving, they are making changes to
Okay,
the
I'll cut
software.
you here in
Yeah.
between a little. I'm sorry for that.
Yes.
Since you mentioned car, I know it might be a bit late to discuss this,
Mhm.
but not like just recently, Jaguar also rebranded
Yes.
themselves. What's your take on that? Because I got a lot of mixed suggestions and things.
Yes, I think it's a mixed reactions people had. For example, when I look at the
Very
first
mixed.
time, I had a little bit of a negative impact, I would say, because I used to love that cat logo and the kind of branding they had previously.
It was a Jaguar,
It was
right?
a Jaguar basically, right? The cat Jaguar, I would say. Now they have completely changed themselves. But at the same time, tell me which company, automobile maker, recently made so much buzz around the world that everybody knows about Jaguar,
That's a pretty
right?
good way to look at it. Actually,
So
I
if you
never
look at
thought
in
of it
that
in
way,
that way.
right? If you look in that way, they people have been talking about Jaguar everywhere. It's like a free marketing they have done for themselves.
Exactly.
And I think if you look at the products which they have now launched, the EV cars which they are focusing on, it aligns with their branding, right? If you look at the car structures and the car model, I don't know what they call it as such.
The car community, though, is really pissed with it because, firstly, EVs don't have a really good reputation among car enthusiasts. They
Correct.
want that throttle power, that combustion engine run by pistons. They want
Yes.
that horsepower. They want to hear that sound of exhausts and all. But yes, that's a really good way to look at Jaguar. It's like they have gone into a different direction than a
They
automobile
wanted to,
company
I
should.
think. I think they wanted to because they had to. Anyways, they were not doing very good as per their
Even
financials.
their founder,
Yeah.
he came in when he was launching his cars and stuff. He said this openly in front of everyone in a public conference that yes, we have chosen to go in this direction and we don't care whether you like it or not, we will still go in here. It was a really bold statement to say, but don't you think it can backfire?
See, anyways, Jaguar was not doing great as per what I have studied. Basically, I'm
Their
not from a
finances were
financial
not
financial.
right.
I'm not a financial analyst here, but yes, they were not doing great. So I think they had a do or die situation. So they have went into a different direction altogether because they want to market themselves very differently. And they are saying, okay, we're going to just focus on the EV basically. Like you have Tesla, basic, right? I think nobody questioned Tesla about why don't you create a combustion engine, right? Because they have always pitched themselves as a EV company, and that's what Jaguar wants to do. They want to say, okay, we are specialized just in EV cars now. We are not doing anything else, and they want to bring that specialization into it.
Specialization, but comes with time, and they are still very
Of
new
course.
in this. They are not even in infancy. They are even prior to that
But
stage
I think
right
they
now.
have that background of car manufacturing and everything, so they
Yeah,
understand the
of course,
market.
that will play in.
Hmm.
Okay, since when we were talking about UX when we started, there was this one thing we touched down on the user research,
Correct.
right? How exactly would you define user research? Because people have different definitions. Some are like, okay, we'll just go to Dribble or Behance, we'll just see, we'll get some screenshots from there, we'll get some
Correct.
ideation, and that is our research. Well, there are some people like you yourself who go dive deep inside it. Like I personally myself, I won't mention my past employers, but for them, when I did a UX research, I literally went down to marketplace and all after creating my entire user survey and interview
Hmm.
form on Google Forms, and I approached them personally out of the blue, and ask them if they could help me. So there's this one thing done in UX industry, especially in research and survey industry, coffee test.
Correct.
That we'll approach them. We'll say that if you give us an interview or if you'll fill this form up for us, we'll buy you a coffee or
Correct.
something.
Yes.
Right? We'll buy
Correct.
you a Starbucks or something,
Yeah.
and while having it, you can answer it.
Yeah.
So what is your definition? How would you
I think
define user research?
user research is about understanding the user, your target audience, simple as that, right? And it's not something new. If you look at marketing people, they try to do the same thing. They try to do a user research, try to understand the competition, and then build a marketing plan on that. So user research is about understanding audience. Now, how you do it, it depends from the project to project and your requirement. So, for example, if you look at the NN group, right? They have multiple ways of doing a user research.
You are a big fan of Don Norman. You never leave him alone.
Yes, of course, I never leave him, and I never want even the students to leave it, because if you want to get a authentic information about something, right? Because UX industry has a lot of confusion in it. I would say, if you go to different articles,
lot.
different YouTube channels and all, but I think NN Group is something you can trust because they do everything based on research. They have research papers for it. They have been doing research. They have been consulting from so many years.
Data-driven person.
And they are kind of data-driven completely. So you can trust them, right? So that's why I generally quote NN Group a lot of times compared to any other website or a random YouTube channel, something like that, because they do that research.
Yes, I
and
remember.
They bring that
Even
first.
back in bootcamp, your every third or fourth line
Yes.
was Don Norman or NN
Correct.
Group.
Yes. I even quote a lot of times Steve Jobs because he has been a great person in terms of he used to love design basically. He was a design lover, I would say, with innovation, and that's what Steve Jobs has brought really to Apple as well, right? So,
Do you think empathy has any place in this? Because a lot of people, I also get a lot of mails and all that could you just go through my portfolio and stuff. And empathy is a key aspect. Most of them are missing. Some claim that this is the empathy map we have created or something. But I guess the very definition of user empathy and understanding user empathy is somewhere misplaced in the industry.
it is. I think again, it's because it depends on the user research you have done, like we were talking about, right? So if you're doing a user research properly, your empathy, you can basically establish an empathy with the user. So empathy basically means you try to understand the user well, your target audience well. You try to design a product for them. You try to think, okay, what they are thinking, what they do in their lifestyle, what the things they say basically, and how they feel about a particular product. So that is about building empathy with them. If you build an empathy with them, you understand, okay, their feelings and everything, and you can design your product as per that, right? If you don't understand them, you'll not be able to design a product for them. You'll be designing a product for yourself, which you're never going to use probably. So that's why empathy is equally important to have. And I think if you can get a right empathy only when you have a right user research done. That's why UX research is very, very important.
This is something I have myself fallen a victim of n number of times, that there's this thing that oftentimes when you have to make a decision, some kind of bias comes in your mind, because you are always putting yourself first. As humans, we
Correct.
are
Yes.
like configured biologically to put ourselves first, and that's why a lot of time we just neglect the needs or the answers.
Correct.
But one thing I have noticed, like when I myself went down there, so I am someone who is a data driven person. I believe in numbers, I believe in stats, I believe numbers never lie, humans do.
Correct.
And that's why I question a lot when I go for some kind of research, even when I am having stakeholders interview or something. One thing I have always noticed, whether it's with stakeholders or whether it's with the end users or the consumers, that when I question them in starting, they are giving good answers. Okay, later on when I am challenging their questions, or I am asking the same question in a more rephrased manner, they start contradicting themselves. That was later when I realized that I need to shift my focus from what users are answering to why they are answering whatever they are answering to a given question.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something you have experienced as well, or you would agree with?
Yeah, completely agree with you on that part. So because see, uh, when you ask a user about a particular question, they will start defending themselves. That's the first thing happens, right? As a human, we try to defend ourselves.
Survival instincts just
Survival
jumps
instinct
in.
comes in place. People are very good at making stories, right?
Agreed.
So if you look at the UX research, if you read books about it, and if you even talk about UX research itself, the very common thing we talk about is that people start making stories. So if I ask you what you do in your day-to-day life, you will start making story.
That's why we have
And
more marketers than designers.
yes, so basically you will start making story, and you may not never tell me what is truly behind it, right? That's why in UX research we say that just don't depend on what user says, also observe the user in their environment, right? Observe them. That's why we apply different methods of UX research. That's why you have A and B testing, you have diary studies, you have observations, you have focus groups. There are different kind of studies you have in UX, because you can't just rely on one data, and you never know what the person is telling you, whether it's true or not. That's why we depend on larger sample, sometimes survey. So we do different UX studies, I would say, because of that.
Methods like A/B testing and focus groups are really common. I'm pretty sure anyone watching this podcast already is aware or familiar with these terms. But could you shed a little light on diary studies?
So diary studies is a simple method of study. For example, I might hire some of the users, right? And whatever they do with my product, let's say giving them my product, right? So whatever they do with the product, or they are using an application,
Tracking
whatever,
their activity.
they're just tracking their activity. Whatever they observe at the end of the day, or maybe during the day, they will just write those pointers in the diary basically here. And so that's one of them as the diary studies. Now, some of the bigger companies, they also might record the user and observe the user in their real environment, which are kind of known as user observations in their own environment. So there are different studies. You have like field studies, which is a part of that.
Great. So coming back to the research part, now like it's been 4 years, I guess, 4 or 5 years back, COVID hit us and
Yes.
it hit us really bad. A lot of remote jobs were created at that time, which are
Right.
still being continued till this date. And even in boot camps, people mostly prefer remote
Correct.
everything,
Yes.
everything remote.
Yes.
Right. Now, while you're conducting research in a remote environment, it has its own challenges.
Yes.
It has its own perks and liabilities both. What would you say are one of the most common challenges and how can one overcome them? A small
In
glimpse
terms of bootcamp, if you're asking.
in terms of both
Okay.
bootcamp and actual when designing a product.
So in terms of bootcamp, if I say, when we talk about UX research, so people, of course, we can only teach you theory on the UX research, what it is, and can give you a sample study to kind of work on it, right? But that's why what I say is in the bootcamp, that if you have that courage, you should have that courage to go out, speak to people, go to cafes. Maybe if you can't go to cafe, maybe just ask your colleagues to do a question answers for you. Whatever surveys you create, or maybe you look for your friends and colleagues. At least go out and do a real research instead of just getting fake or a synthesized user research, I would say, right? So that's one thing I recommend them. If you talk about companies itself, if you look at companies like Google and all, so what they do, they can't go out, they do it within their company as a research. So within the team, they do at least a role play activity. At least you can do that, right? If you can't, maybe because let's say if you're COVID, you can't go really out, so I can't force you to go out and do a research on the users, but at least you can try to understand them by just a role play activity. Even NN groups kind of suggest that if you don't have anything possible, at least do a role play activity. At least you're doing something instead of nothing.
Yes, role plays are really good for this.
Yes.
Coming to the next point, accessibility. Nowadays, this is really in trend. Whether if even if you're going for an interview or something, people are less focused on the aesthetic sense of yours and more focused on what kind of accessibility do you provide in your very portfolio or the past projects,
Yes.
whatever it is. So, could you shed a little light on? Okay, for our viewers, just first, if you could just tell what accessibility exactly means
So
and
as
how is it different from usability?
Okay, so usability and accessibility are two different things, right? So accessibility talks about that you're making a system accessible to everyone. Not everybody is same in this world, right? So some people may be blind, some people are deaf, some people are color blind, right? Some people have low vision, there could be etc etc, right? So accessibility talks about that making places accessible for everyone, whether a digital or a physical space, right? So you need to make the your website product accessible for everyone. This is
Could you
what we
give an
talk about.
example as well?
So for example, let's say for example, like we talked about government websites, right? Of course they look pretty bad, in terms of the UI and the way they have been structured. But
They
if you
look
look at,
like third or fourth page of
yeah,
newspaper. A
yes,
lot of data
yes,
clutter. No one
yes.
reads it.
But if you look at the accessibility feature, they have that. For example, you can increase the font there, you can decrease the font, you can
Right.
increase the contrast
Font
there.
size and all.
So this is like one of the accessibility. If you look at the example of accessibility, you have YouTube. In the YouTube, you have captions, right? So captions are that's not helpful for people with disabilities. But if, for example, if you have a language barrier, for example, I don't know Korean, I don't know Chinese, but I can still watch a Chinese or a Korean
Do you
video.
watch K-pops?
No, I don't.
Good. Yes. Continue. Sorry.
So you can basically watch that particular movie, or you can look at an interview of someone with the captions itself, right? You don't have to just rely on the audio there. So accessibility can help in multiple ways. It make your product more accessible to a wider audience, I would say. And by the way, it's a law, right? So if you go to US, you have a section 508, right? In European Union, you have an act of accessibility. Indian government has also launched the act in 2016, right, about accessibility in digital products. So it's compulsory by government as well, and especially if you're working for a federal government company or a government organization, you need to have accessibility in their product.
Since you just mentioned Section 508, Section 508 is a really important section of WCAG guidelines.
Correct.
So WCAG has been a lot in trend, especially among American and European recruiters when they are recruiting from India, especially.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell why it is so important and why they are more focusing on it, and what could we as Indian product designers, developers, or even businessmen could learn from that, and why should we accommodate WCAG in our product cycle?
I think it has to be there. I think it's not have to be added separately, I would say, especially in today's world,
It should
because
be a must.
it should be a must, I would say, right? But of course, you can't follow them 100% as it is, I would say, right? Because
Yes.
there is a difference between following a guideline and making a visual product of your theme. For example, if you look at the WCGA AAA contrast guidelines, it makes the contrast very very harsh if you look at it, right? And in your product it might not look great in terms of the uh, you know the visual appeal of it, I would say. So you have to follow the guidelines, but in a certain way that it basically fulfills the requirement of the target audience, and it maintains your visual appeal. That's the first thing I would say here. Now, why it's important is, like I said, it's a law, right? And everybody don't want to be questioned at a later stage, right? Why you're not doing it in that particular way, right? So every company wants to be compliant to the
India also
government.
should make this a law, no?
India already has that. The only problem is that we don't follow it.
Because it's not enforced that strictly, I believe.
Yeah, it's not enforced that strictly. Even if you look at US, the private companies are not following it as much as they should compared to the government. So government is like a mandatory to have, but privates are doing it to a certain extent, right? And of course, the this is accessibility now becoming a little bit easier because of AI and all. Because, for example, previously I remember when I was a web developer, we need to give a alt tag to every image. Nowadays, AI systems can read the image itself and auto generate the caption or a alt tag for them, right? So you don't have to do that. So it's becoming a little bit easier, I would say. And the monitors, if you look at the monitors and the kind of screens we have, they have improved the color accuracy and everything. So it becomes easier to follow the guidelines, I would say. But yet, yes, as a designer, if you are starting your career, you should know what those guidelines are. Like I meet a lot of people who don't even know what is double
Even
A's.
major boot camps miss that.
Yeah, so sometimes, even if the boot camps have it, people don't pay attention to it. That's the problem, right? So they don't know what double A is, what triple A guidelines are, what is color control guidelines are, what are color harmonies are, right? Why should you have captions? People think captions is just for as just an add-on feature for something, right? Actually, captions are basically accessibility feature you have
There's
in
this
your
product.
videos and audios, basically.
There's this product I worked on. It was for a German school, and so that it was an entire school system. They had multiple branches, and they were specialized in teaching people with disability, kids with disability.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a consultant there. I won't mention their name in here for copyright issues.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube is pretty sensitive with their guidelines. So yes, I was working with them as a full-time product consultant, and they had a lot of kids who were either partially color blind, And we used to do this thing like a recorded lecture is there. We also added another module which had the entire transcript
Okay.
of the entire module, because not everyone can hear that. Some had hearing issues or
Mm.
something, some had language barriers.
Mm.
But if you look at edtech in India, do you think they are really, because they are, edtech I believe is someone who should be like strictest when it comes to WCAG guidelines and accessibility guidelines, but are they following
No,
the
not
Indian
no.
edtech?
I would say no. I think they not everybody is following it. If they are following to a certain extent, I would say, because everything requires money. I would say to do it. If you talk about accessibility, you need to look about transcriptions. Now, of course, you can with AI, you can do that very easily now.
I believe it's not just about money, it's also about a lot of them are not aware or
Aware
don't give
about it,
it
I would
this
say, yeah, they're not
importance.
aware about it. They don't know the importance of it. Most probably, they don't know like what are the guidelines first of all, right? They're not even aware about, okay, there is something called as WCG, right? And we need to follow those guidelines. People don't even aware about that, so that's the first.
Like you mentioned Coursera earlier,
Hmm.
I'm just saying, like, imagine a Coursera just for disabled people.
Yeah, I think that could be a good concept, but I think Coursera is doing some part of it. Like for example,
Yeah,
I
I was
think,
just giving an
yeah, so for
example.
example, yeah, so we can have something like that, right? But uh,
Like
it,
LinkedIn Learning could have that.
LinkedIn Learning, to a certain extent, yeah. So see, what you would do in LinkedIn Learning, right? They have the captions there basically for you, right? And they have the guidelines actually. If you
Like
build a course,
transcripts and color
yeah. So they have the
contrast, all those
transcripts, they
things.
have the captions there. They also tell their instructor, by the way, if you build a course for them, right? Because I've seen their guidelines in the past. So they say that when you're making a PPT, just have a white color and a black text on it. It is good for two things. One is the accessibility. The second thing is it's also easy to process in the video processor. Means it makes your video lighter to play back, right? As a and consume less data. So that's how they instruct generally people about it, right? So they have the guidelines in place. But yes, when you're actually designing the content, creating the content, sometimes people miss it out, following that content on, and following those accessibility guidelines. They somewhere get
Right.
sided, I would say,
Sideline.
then to be into a mainstream there. Because if you talk about a product manager, he's most focused on, okay, I want to get this feature out as soon as possible without bugs and so on, so on. Probably nobody has time for accessibility to look at.
Right. Earlier, you mentioned that a lot of these companies are creating transcripts through AI. So one thing I have noticed a lot, that AI is having a huge impact on our lives, in our day-to-day lives as well, and there is a huge fear among people that AI will replace us. Whereas I always had this common belief that AI will not replace you. The people who know how to use and leverage AI will replace those who don't know how to. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I have the same kind of vision on that, like, basically, I would say. So AI can replace you, to be frank, right? If you if you don't upgrade yourself. The
If you are
main
a
thing is,
generic designer or
if you're a
developer.
generic designer, you need to be different now. See, if I can build something with AI, why would I hire you, right? If you talk about the biggest market which have been impacted after this AI is the copywriting, or if you talk about content writing. But that doesn't mean that content writers are out of job. They still have job, right?
They're specialized ones, but
But
no.
only the specialized one. If you have been a generic one, you don't have your job to be there,
How
right?
would you draw the line between generic and specialized?
It's a little bit difficult, to be frank, at this point of time, I would say. But if you're really good in art, for example, right, if you can create a unique art, if you can think out of the box, and you can use AI in that thinking box process, you can create something much more different than what other people can create. And that's how you can become different and you can still be employed.
Again, leveraging AI instead of
Yes.
being replaced by it.
Yeah, it's basically you have to leverage the AI. And if you think that, okay, I'm not going to study AI, I don't like it, it's going to replace my job, then you will be left behind. So
Then
it's
so definitely
very,
it's
very
going to.
important to basically upgrade yourself, understand how AI works, and how you can take benefit of the AI. If you look at most of the companies, they're investing heavily on AI. I have worked with a lot of companies who are now using AI for their idea generations, even for getting PPTs, etc., etc. Right? They're trying to leverage AI in it. Of course, I would say that, let's say if I needed a 10 people of team in the past, I might now need only 5 people, because I can get the some of the task done by the AI automatically, or easily. So I might need overall less people compared to what workforce I needed. That's why you need to be different. You need to be, using that AI features. You need to understand how AI works, and that's important.
So, as we were talking about the impact of AI on design, do you think there is anything such as ethical use of AI in design and unethical use of AI in design?
Of course, they are both. I think say I would say good and bad sides of AI, right? If
But
you
in
look at
terms of use,
in terms of use, yes. So basically, see, it depends on the user end user, right?
of course.
Somebody has created something, so you can use it for good, you can use it for bad. If you look at Photoshop, right? People use it for both purposes, I would say, right? So same thing goes with AI. There's of course an ethical and unethical use of it, and even as the AI is evolving, there have been a lot of discussion about ethical use of AI, because sometimes the AI might learn from a model of a particular artist and mimic the same art, right? So I think the guidelines have been created by government that it's remain as much as possible as ethical. If you look at Adobe has been saying that their trained models are completely ethical because they don't steal any work. They are not watching you what you're doing in Photoshop, right? They're
But actually,
creating.
they do. If you
Yeah,
go
if you accept the terms and condition, depends. If you
the
enable them,
updated terms
yeah,
and
if you
conditions.
if you do that, right? So to certain extent they do it. They don't actually look at your work exactly as it is, to be frank, but yes. So if you're using the AI features and you're processing on the cloud, they of course have their data a bit on it, but they're trying to be ethical as much as possible, I would say. So as
I
a
am sure
user,
they are.
yeah, as a user, you need to decide what level you want to use AI, I would say. And if you're stealing someone's artwork through email, let's say if you take some 10 or 15 samples of an artwork of some particular artist and try to recreate that, that's just, of course, I think I would feel that it's going to be unethical to do that.
But don't you think in this case the user can fall victim of something he's not responsible for? Let's just say the AI module stole someone else's aesthetics or even some parts of his design, and then he used them to create a design for you. You are not the real culprit, but how are you going to explain that? If you even say that it was created by AI,
Yeah, somebody
you can't
has
arrest
to.
AI.
No, yes, of course you have to take accountability. Somebody has to take accountability,
Exactly. Who will take the
and that's
accountability?
that's what government is trying to decide, and this is what the rules have been framed on exactly, right? Because sometimes maybe the chat GPT might say, okay, I'm not responsible for it. This is what I've been trained on, right? So government are saying that companies should take accountability on it.
Did you read that article when ChatGPT went rogue? There was something like you should die or something.
Yes. I think I don't remember. I think there was something about that. The chat GPT was a little bit biased
Trust.
on that.
Also,
And
it was trying
yes,
to clone itself
correct.
somewhere when it recognized that pattern, say
Yes,
that he's about to be
yes.
deleted or shut down.
Yeah, that's some of the dangers of AI, I would say. But yeah, so I think that in technical, if you talk about technology, things
It
always
feels like a
goes wrong.
Terminator movie or something we are getting
Yes.
ourselves into.
So I think companies are trying. That's why if you look at the European Union, especially if you look at the US, right, and there's also an international body which I don't remember, some by US based, which is an international body for AI now. They're trying to control and uh, make AI more responsible as a tool itself, right? So there's some guidelines which governments are now following on it, but it will take time. Of course, you can't. It's a very upcoming field, I would say. So of course this will happen, I would say.
Right. Okay, leaving AI behind, so there are a lot of new trends which are emerging in UX itself. Okay, let's even if we say if we go back to that language of these so-called boot camps or the bookish language that a website or
Mm-hmm.
a application is UX, then there are new like grid system, Bento grid systems and all which are coming in.
Correct.
And the most innovative one, my personal favorite, have been the MR, AR, and VR mixed reality, virtual
Hmm.
reality, and augmented reality. Do you have any experience with the same?
Yeah, so I develop basically applications on. I've developed application projects on AR, VR both, or you can call it as a mixed reality. So I was fortunate to use Microsoft HoloLens 1 and 2 as well. I have worked with Oculus Quest, means I worked on Oculus Quest. I was not able to get a hands on Vision Pro, Vision basically by Apple now. So I think you can be a designer if it requires a lot of UX actually there.
Would you like to work on Vision Pro,
Of course, I would love to work on Vision Pro, but I think the market adaptability is very low right now for it.
especially in our country?
That's not in our country. If you look at even in US, Apple is no longer developing a second version of Vision OS on it, and not expanding outside of US too much
It
as
was
of
pretty
now.
expensive as well.
It's pretty expensive. I think the main thing is the software is way ahead. If you look at all these companies, the softwares are already way ahead. If you look at Meta, if you look at Microsoft as well, and if you look at Apple also, their softwares are way ahead. It's about the experience of the device.
In case of Meta, I never heard anything after they announced Metaverse.
So no, they have the device. So metaverse have been a buzzword, especially in the COVID times, right? So it was like a
Trying to
buzzword.
rebrand them.
Yeah, rebrand them. That's for the kind of a trending word that time. I would say metaverse. If you look at decentralized, you can have a property virtually now, and you can buy a land for 10 lakh, 20 lakh rupees, right? Virtually, right? Nobody thought about that. You can buy a property online, basically, right?
I
As
am not.
NFTs and as an
I'm not into much
NFTs.
into virtual real estate as they call themselves.
Hmm.
Like I have some of my better friends are real estate agents and all, and was having word with one of them, and she was like, "What are you even saying?" Right? Like even a lot of real estate people are not aware that okay, some virtual real estate is also being
Correct.
sold, because real estate has always had this kind of image that it is one of the safest markets, or at least the markets that will outlast every other market because it is actually present,
Yes.
right? But now with this entire meta thing, they just went somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's a different aspect. I think people who are more digitally involved in it, I think they purchase it. People who invested, I think way back in 2019, 18, they have got a good returns on that, especially during, like I said, in COVID, right? Now I think the buzzword is going a little bit down in the metaverse, I would say. But if you talk about the virtual reality devices and these devices, they have a bright future. Maybe not now. For example, if you look at probably in 90s, when the computers were kind of an upcoming thing, right? People thought they're not going to replace you, or they're not going to be as good as what today it is, right? Nobody thought about iPhone to have in a pocket, right? It's kind of a computer in itself, if you look at it, right? You do a lot of your task. Same ways, currently, if you look at those headsets, you can't wear it all day. Even if you look at Apple, they have been saying that you can take Vision Pro anywhere while you're on a flight, while you're driving, maybe you're sitting in a car, you're sitting in a cafe, you can use a Vision Pro, and you can do your work. You can even do editing.
So would you like to work on Vision Pro if you could get a chance?
Of course, I would like to work on it, right? Because it gives you a different perspective of designing, and it has different levels of interaction if you
It's
look at
just
it.
about perspective or kind of that curiosity to tinker with the new
Of course,
technology.
that's the curiosity of because I've already designed for it. If you look at Microsoft HoloLens 1 and 2, they have been very similar to Vision Pro for a little bit different tech and different OS, I would say. And Oculus Quest is also similar. If you look at the Quest 3, it also offers you mixed reality, AR, and VR now into it. So Vision Pro is similar to that, I would say. Though I have not experienced it till now because it has not been in India, and I did not have the opportunity to go out and look at the device in the Vision Pro.
You can import it.
Yeah, I can import it, but the
Cost.
it's about the cost effective, right? So for example, if I bring a Vision Pro, right, I know the technology will be out in next 1 or 2 years, and I might not get that ROI because most of the companies are not investing on Vision Pro, right?
Right, for now.
For now, especially because it is not available in the Indian market, right? It's only available in the US market.
Even general AR VR headsets are not that common in
That common
India.
because I think it's either for majorly for gaming or for specialized industries, right? For example, if you want to train your employees on a factory how to work on a machinery or something, then you are employing virtual reality there. So that's why uh, not every company is using that device, right?
I saw this one clip. I It was of some private military, and they were just experimenting and they were showcasing how they could. Okay, a lot of armed forces already do this.
Yes,
There are manned drones, and they actually use those AR/VR technologies
correct.
to. Right. There's a company, Dassault Aviations.
Yes,
So, like India had a deal to import Rafale jets. Dassault Aviation is the one who
hmm.
manufactures Rafale jet and imported it into
Yes,
India, right? Those guys are like super maniacs when it comes to aerial defense. Dassault Aviation is a defense company
yes,
specializing in aerial
yeah,
defense, right? And those guys have like there was another I don't know who produced this hardware, Apache helicopter. It's a
Mm-hmm.
fighter helicopter,
Yes.
and they had this thing that they have a headset, and there's the visor and all. And if the pilot looks in this direction, the machine gun mounted at the bottom will also turn to that
Yes.
direction.
Yes.
And if you look at an enemy craft or something, it will start shooting. So it's
Yes.
like you see it and you shoot it.
Yes.
That
That's the
kind
eye
of
tracking. Yeah.
seamless experience, the eye
Yes.
tracking and that stuff.
Yeah.
So in the defense industry, I've seen that this is getting a lot of name.
Yeah, just not in defense industry, even if you look at Indian industry itself also, there are a lot of people who are developing actually VR solutions for training their employees. Let's say for example, Maruti, right? Or if you talk about any car manufacturer, right, who wants to train their workforce on how to work on the assembly line, right? It's very expensive to train on a live assembly line, right? So they can train on VR. I've been doing recently a medical project on VR where you can train doctors how to use a particular equipment of medical,
That's
which is coming
insane.
new, right? So because that is going to be less expensive, less, I would say, risk for the companies as well and doctors to do it, and they can get a good idea about how to use it. Of course, they get trained on the live also afterwards, but they get a very good understanding about it, right? If you look at even Maruti, Maruti have a driving school, so they have a
Hmm.
visual simulator. First they train on visual simulator how to drive a car, and then they take you to the car actually. So that's a pattern they follow
Which
basically
is
for it.
actually different from the car simulators in those malls, arcades,
Yes,
and
of
stuff.
course, that is very different from that
Right.
way, right? So it's been used in a heavy on a day-to-day basis for bigger companies. But if it's about daily uses, for example, if I ask currently how many people will have Oculus Quest or this kind of a devices like a mobile phone, it is not as common as mobile phone. Maybe that's the future, because recently if you look at the Meta, they have launched partnership with Ray-Ban, and the Ray-Ban have a smart glasses, so they look like a normal glasses, but they have lenses to it. You can look at the information in augmented way. If you look at anything, it can tell you the information about that object without doing anything, right?
Right.
So that's the future, but the technology, I think the hardware have to evolve a lot over the time, and that will happen maybe in the next 5 or 10 years. We might it might become very common like a mobile phone. If you talk about when the mobile phone came in early 90s and all, it was bulky, it was big, nobody thought of carrying every day in their pocket. Now we are doing it. So we never know about technology, so it's better for the UX designers, I would say, understand the technology at least and experience at least once, because when you only experience, then only you can design for it, right? If you don't experience, because it's a very different technology to design for example, if you have never used a website, you've never used a mobile phone, how will you design it for it? Same as if you have never experienced AR/VR, you will not be able to design for it. So experience is the most important thing.
Experiences like steroids on creativity.
Yes,
Creativity on steroids. Sorry.
correct. So you have to basically experience it. I think day to day life you have to experience that thing, and then you can design, because the interactions are very very different.
Right. So we are almost at the end of this podcast.
Sure.
How are you feeling right now?
I think great.
This is
It's
your also
also my
first,
first
right?
kind of I was second, because I had done one online kind of on a just a talk with one of my
No, in
friends or in
person, I
terms
am
of, yeah,
saying.
in person. This is going to be my first podcast for
Hmm.
sure.
Okay, so we are almost at the end. Now this is strictly for the career advice of those who are
Okay.
already into UX or are
Mhm.
trying to break into UX. I just have 2 3 generic questions, then I'll come to some really specific and questions
Sure.
for people who are really experienced in this industry.
Okay.
Let's start with the portfolio itself. How would you define a weak portfolio and a strong portfolio? And what can a person with weak portfolio do to improve it and turn it to a strong one?
Okay. So I think the weak portfolio generally lacks a story, I would say, right? They do not have a proper case study in it, or if the case study is also there, it might not be structured properly, I would say, right? And maybe the UI doesn't look, even if I look at most of the case studies or the portfolios, they are not visually appealing. So the first thing, you have to have a visual appeal to it, right? And of course, what content you have and how you present that story. For example, if you look at movies, right, movies present a story to us over the time. So same ways you have to present a story in the portfolio, has to be there, right? And your personalized feel or the personalized style has to be there. If I look at 10 portfolios, if I see the same template, if I see the same pictures there, people also doing that, right? uh, then I come to know it looks like it's not been personalized to your design state, what you has a capability of doing something. So you need to really customize that portfolio to match your personality, your design skills, and what you can make as a difference in the UX industry there. And if your portfolio is weak, then take feedback. There are a lot of people who are providing feedback to you. For example, you have adapt list nowadays, right? You can connect with mentors. You can do a free 30-minute session. Even I'm on the adapt list, so I do a lot of portfolio reviews there,
Shout out to him. Yeah.
right? So you can go there. You can really let people look at your work, take feedback, and be open to the feedback. That's the second thing. If you're going for a feedback also, you should understand what the other person is saying, right? And you have to work on that feedback. You have to act on it. Just not take the feedback, but also act on that feedback. And that's how you can make your portfolio strong. And remember, you cannot be good at it from day one, right? So a lot of people who finish a bootcamp or something, their portfolio might not be great, but that doesn't mean that you keep it as it is. So if you keep evolving that portfolio, you can become great, definitely. So day one or your first case study won't be so great, but if you keep doing it, it will be great.
One thing I've also noticed along with the lines you just mentioned, like if you remember, I and my project partner were making project Shud Sankalp.
Yes.
And let's just say that project itself we use as portfolio, we send our resume to some company. And a lot of times I've noticed you're not rejected because you have a bad portfolio. Your portfolio is really great. But like our project Shud Sankalp was a e-waste management project. The company was a travel and tourism company, let's just say.
Yes.
And they were looking for some different kind of designer who has made something along those lines of tour and travel is. But people get discouraged that, oh, I got rejected.
So I think that's okay. I think you should understand what company you're applying to, right? And if you have done a particular case study, right? See, I think it depends on the employer also, I would say. So as an employee, if I'm looking for a person at a beginner level, I would say it doesn't really matter what kind of a portfolio topic they have taken on, but what kind of a skill set they have, right? But if I'm looking for let's say if I'm looking for a person of a UX designer in a particular matured product, then I might look in the same line. For example, if I'm a SaaS company, so I might look for a person who have experience in SaaS products, because I know that person understands the technology, how SaaS works, terminologies of it, so they can align with better with my team, right? So that's both the sides. It depends for what kind of a company you're applying, but I think you should not get discouraged because of that, because uh, every company has their own unique requirements, and you can't make everybody happy, and your portfolio might not fit to every job and situation, so that's okay.
Right. Next question I have for you is what advice would you give to people who are trying to pivot into UX industry? Like take any profession at random.
Yeah, for example, architecture, right? So I've seen a lot of people coming from architecture background, fashion design background to UX UI designing, right? First thing I would tell them that it is not that you just make a shift and you get a job, right? UX UI is hot, it has jobs in it, but it's not so easy also, right? So first you have to make a mindset that you want to really switch, right? You have, so maybe you spend 3 hours 4 hours in a college doing a fashion design or architecture, and you're trying to be a UX designer.
Architects have to spend 5 years just for bachelor's.
Yes, so you have spent so much time on it, right? And you want to now shift to UX basically. So why are you shifting it? Is it because only to get a job,
Or for money or for.
or for a money, or are you at least good at it, right? You have to understand your design skills. So just don't make a shift because everybody is making a shift, right, from a particular industry. Understand your core strengths, that's important, and understand the technology before you shift, because I've seen a lot of people coming and doing a boot camp or maybe doing a course in UX in UI, then they realize, oh, this is not for me, I'm not able to do anything in it, and they have to probably go back to their
How many
original
percent
industry.
of people would you say bomb in a boot camp? Like I know for sure, numbers speak for themselves, that half of them don't even study, don't even submit their final case study or something.
Yes,
What has your
don't even
experience
complete their
been?
complete course, I would say, right?
Right.
So half of them does not even do that, but that's okay. I think by the time they understand, or they might shift to a different career altogether.
And even those who do, are they all that employable after just one boot camp?
Not really, to be frank. right?
If we have
They
10
might be
people,
good for internships and all, I would say, to get started. Especially if you're making a career change or they are freshers, right? So their portfolio might not be up to the mark. It's not because of the boot camp, I would say. It's because of it takes time to develop that understanding.
number of repetitions are not
Number
enough.
of repetitions is matter, right? So when we start a boot camp, we always say that start building your own case studies side by side. Start learning Figma. I think the major challenge, if I talk frankly, UX is easy to understand because UX is theoretical,
Right.
right? You can
It's
understand
all
it's
documentation, paperwork.
documentation and all basically you have, right? So UX is easy to learn actually, but where the problem comes is the implementation of UI. You need to have the design sense.
But people don't have patience for UX. They don't even want to invest time in
Yeah,
UX.
so but they don't even have the UI skills actually. That's the major problem, right? Even I've seen people who are maybe coming from a good research background, probably they can be good at UX for sure in the UX research and all, but they might not be good at UI. And especially in the Indian job market, you need a combination of UX and UI both.
Right.
So you have to be good at designing something. Something should look visually good, right? You people just simply use different gradients and all. They just use colors. They're designing a UI, which is not. I a lot of time ask my participant that, okay, will you download this app from the app store which you have designed? It's done by someone else. They say no. Then how can you call it as a good UI design? How can you call it as a portfolio of yours?
At times, it's not even a case study, let alone a good or bad case
Yes,
study.
yes.
So let's just say that there are 30 students. Among them, hardly 10 or 11 submitted the actual portfolio, the case study to you. How many of you think will get top tier job? How many will be there for internship? And how many would be unemployable? Out of 10, if we just say
I think one or two only would be at a higher
top tier.
top level. I would say not more than that generally.
Internship or barely employable?
Probably,
Based on your personal experience.
yeah, I would say 3 to 4. I would say, right? They might
So
not be
more than
employable.
50% fail to get it.
Approximately, yeah,
Approximately
yeah,
50%, half of
50%.
them.
I would say. The reason is because they're just joining a boot camp because everybody is doing that, right?
Or because maybe they don't want to take the accountability of whatever is happening in their
Yes,
life.
yes. So, but they might be employable at a later stage, not just after the boot camp. I would say, if they continuously working on it, right?
But most of them do lose courage with time, right?
People lose courage. They might lose the flow. They might lose the discipline. I would say
Self-discipline matters a lot.
self-discipline to do it right after the boot camp. So that's why I say when you're doing the boot camp, do it seriously. Do as much efforts you can put in there, and just don't create something for submission. Create something to build your portfolio.
Great. So I have one burning question which I told you, the
Yeah.
specialized one, and actually this is a personal question from my side as well.
Okay.
Let's just say someone is already in UX, has experience, and now he wants to shift into a really rare industry, like let's just say defense or Dassault Aviation or any such a industry, or in any arms defense company.
Yes. Sure. Yes.
Such rare companies or submarines and all. How could he break into that kind of industry or niche?
In terms of UX, I would say you have to build a case study for them, right? You have to understand the technology. If you talk about, if you talk about aviation, right?
Like planes have those display systems and all.
Display system, there are a lot of things you have there, right? So you have to understand those first of all, right? So it will take time, because that's a very specialized field,
And
right?
there is no boot camp for that.
And there's no boot camp for it. And then
Right.
maybe there will never be a boot camp for it, probably, because it takes time to understand it, design for it, right? So if you're targeted as such a company, I would say you have to take smaller steps, right? And you have to create a case study around
But
it.
the payment is also insane around those industries.
Yes, of
Then.
course. But I think, yeah, it's just not about payment. I think I always believe one thing: if you love something, do it. Right? It is not about the payment.
Money
I
would be a
say.
byproduct.
Money would be a byproduct. It will automatically come if you do something good, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that the farmers don't earn good money. They can also earn good money, right, if they do it. So no job is small, I would say. It's about what you love to do. If you're very fond of aviation, if you're really fond of that technical details, if you can read about it, go there, right? Just going there for a money won't, I think, make sense, because you may not get the actual value out of it.
Right. I just have some final questions, and I want you to be as short and specific
Okay.
as you can. And with this, we'll end our podcast then. First one, what is the most underrated skill for a user experience designer or a product designer?
I would say UX itself, the UX research, the initial parts of UX. When you talk about
Okay.
empathy of the UX, people just want to start getting design, start coding. So that's the most underrated skills. You have to understand the theoretical part of UX.
Okay. Second, what is the most challenging UX problem you personally have ever faced, and how did you deal with it?
Convincing the client to do the UX, or convincing a stakeholder to do the UX. I think that's one of the biggest challenge you have in the industry. If I have a client who wants to get a website, they want to see a design tomorrow. I need to explain them that UX is equally important. We are not designing for you or me. We are designing for your audience.
Don't be biased.
And yeah, and we need to show them that you can have a better ROI because of that.
What do you think is the biggest trend right now that upcoming UXers could hop on in the industry?
I think there are a lot many, to be frank. I
The
think
biggest one, if you
the
had to choose one.
biggest one is the AI, right? Understanding how you can integrate AI into your systems, right? Into your application, whatever you're designing basically,
Cool.
and which can basically ease the process for the user.
What do you think would be the biggest challenge facing the UX industry in the coming decade?
The right skill people, I would say, for the
Isn't that
employers.
still a challenge? You
It
think
is
it will
it is a
continue
still a
to
challenge. I think it's going to be continue because the way people have been upskilling themselves in the UX industry, right? And that's one of the challenge which remains with the company for sure, even in the upcoming days. Secondly, if you are looking for a job, remember there are more people now. If you go back to 2022, right? There was a time you had a lot of low end jobs also in UX. Now people are much more upskilled. There are more people in the UX industry available. So getting a job can be difficult if you're not very differentiated, right? You have to be
Yeah.
differentiate yourself.
How do you stay inspired and motivated in a fast-paced industry like this?
Learning new things. I think I personally I love to learn new
Having
things.
curiosity.
Curiosity to look at ways of different things. I keep observing different apps. So that's how I keep myself updated. I think you don't have to put any extra efforts to get yourself updated nowadays. You can look at technology around you, observe it, learn from it, and then you can implement the same in your UX projects.
Great. What is the most surprising thing you have learned about human behavior through your work as a product specialist?
Okay, so people hate change, right? But if the change is for good, you might have to force it to the people. That's what Apple does.
Is it that people hate change, or is it that they hate to step out of their comfort zone, even if
Yeah, you
it's
can
for their
we can,
own
we can
good?
say that also. They don't want to jump out of their comfort zone.
Right. One last question I have for you, and then we'll end this podcast. If you could design a product that would make the world a better place, what would it be?
I think I would say better the I would say better hardware for AR VR technology, right?
Because
If you
that's the upcoming
yeah, that's
future.
the upcoming field. That's the future basically of it. And if we can design a product which is more user friendly to use on a day to day life.
Okay, thanks a lot for coming, and I hope I didn't bully you or something
No,
in
no,
anything. How was
not
your
at all.
experience?
I think great. It was a great learning for me also. I would say the podcast, right? Because I'm doing for the first time, and we have a great team here.
We do.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining me. And guys, thanks a lot for watching this and coming to my first podcast. It means a lot. Hats off to you guys. Mad respect for you. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.